I guess second in line at most of the events we've been at this year, whether it's MadFest, Cannes. AI did take the gold, but something that came in a very close second was sustainability. And I know we talked about it a little bit before, but we want to kind of dig into your thoughts and maybe how you could help some other business leaders and other people in the ad tech industry to kind of improve and step up. So my first question for you lads is it possible to keep businesses 100% sustainable?
Do you mean specifically ad tech businesses?
Let's start with that, because I think that's probably going to be a nice way to kind of jump off of.
So I think probably not is the answer, but there's definitely some work that can be done to reduce the amount of emissions produced by ad tech. It actually produces more than the aviation industry, which is quite hard to believe, but
that's crazy.
I think that is largely down to the infrastructure that's used. There's been virtually zero improvements in the underlying infrastructure that supports ad tech transactions in the last 10 years. It's predominantly been innovation around formats and targeting, which has meant that the infrastructure has kind of taken a back foot because it served the purpose that it needed to. And I think through the development of the infrastructure that we have at Alchemy, kind of using blockchain rails to fulfill programmatic auctions, we've seen that can deliver pretty significant savings on the amount of emissions that are produced to buy and sell an ad programmatically.
That's really interesting. So essentially what you're saying is the lack of innovation with specifically within the kind of environmental impact is kind of massively impacted the industry. Whereas if you look at the automotive, we've seen the likes of electric cars, trying improvements there. You're saying it's mainly focused on improvement of how we serve ads or target rather than actually into the infrastructure that.
Yeah, because I think like the emissions are less tangible. Like you can see the smoke coming out of a combustion engined car, but you don't really see the emissions produced by the buying and selling of an ad programmatically. So I think it was last year, Greenpeace showed up at Cannes and kind of really put a magnifying glass on the emissions that are produced. And since that point, it has been at the forefront of marketers' minds.
I think there's also one of your greatest hits is about the page load that happens. So most of the interaction that happens on a page is done through JavaScript, and especially with things like the like button that Facebook use, that is very, very heavy on JavaScript to produce what is essentially a thumbs up for someone saying something, and things like that are kind of very like behind the scenes, and people don't even think it's click a button, that's great, but actually what's happening is that is causing extra page load, extra weight on pretty much every part of the infrastructure that goes into serving like both ads and websites, and that actually then has a net negative effect and makes the emissions much larger than people would ever realize. But it makes the page look cool and it makes it more interactive, but actually those are the things that are really causing a lot of the problems.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting and kind of leads quite nicely onto the next question, which probably leads to the answer, and it's around that kind of innovation in product or kind of targeting rather than thinking about the kind of bones behind it. So my next question was, what advice would you have for other business leaders wanting to build like an ethical company that has a positive environmental impact rather than this huge negative one? Maybe we've kind of answered it a little bit already.
Well, I guess what we haven't touched on is that we are in the process of being certified as a B Corp. There's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through for that to be true, one of which is the amount of, the environmental impact of whichever business it is that you're running. I think whilst we are still relatively small, it's been easy for us to fulfill those requirements, and fingers crossed we get that stamp of approval to show that all of our efforts have passed the bar and we are a B Corp. And then I think as far as like values driven, we do have clear values as a business. We talk about those with everyone all the time, and just making sure that you find sensible people, really, I think is probably the answer there.
I think just on top of that, we have always built Alchemy with generative economics in mind, and as part of that, it's instead of being extractive and basically looking to extract value from a system for your own gain, it's about creating an environment where if I win, you win. And as part of that, there is also the sort of environmental impact on top. So it's like everything you do is designed to create a positive outcome, as opposed to looking to achieve something and then working your way backwards to become that sustainable or like environmentally friendly company. It's actually like designing everything from the ground up to be that way. So you don't go out looking to exploit people, for example. It's like, okay, no, that's not a good way to build a business. It's like it might make you profit quickly, but that shouldn't be your first priority, because if you're making it in a sleazy way, as a song would say, like, you know, it's not actually worth it. You know, you're creating more problems that you then have to clean up later, rather than just not making the problem exist in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think what we're seeing now is, because we have to take a step back, like you said, Greenpeace kind of shone a bit of a light on it. Now people are actually looking into why and how, you know, that their campaigns are impacting, you know, the kind of the rest of the world. So this sort of stuff is really exciting. I guess it's nice that you guys are kind of at the forefront of that, and also I guess giving them the kind of guardrails to break out of what the current system offers.
Yeah, I think if you're trying to build something that is efficient, which is, we want efficiency in fees, we want efficiency in the trading activity, kind of that will naturally yield to an efficiency in energy, whether that is like human energy or electronical energy, which then kind of gives you that sustainable edge in terms of both like the longevity and emissions that are created from whatever it is that you're trying to solve as a business.
So next question I had for you is a bit of a two-parter, and again, I think with a lot of this now being brought to the forefront, greenwashing is a huge thing. And how could you advise companies to, you know, enforce these kind of sustainable practices that are genuine and not just kind of greenwashing or for marketing purposes? And yeah, have you got any advice to maybe how they could, you know, incorporate those into their own companies to make sure that those, you know, efforts are either, you know, you've got a metric to track that, or they're prioritized in a certain way?
Yeah, I think we sort of spoke about it in the build up a little bit about carbon credits, for example, are a way of greenwashing a little bit, because essentially you're taking your current emissions and you're like, look at me, I'm reducing them, and then I get a credit for the amount that I've reduced it by. It's like, it's very well meaning, but at the same time it creates a metric that is gameable. Yeah. So there's many companies that will have a load of green credits and then they'll sell them on to some other company who then just carries on doing whatever they want to do, rather than actually trying to stop the process of like creating too much carbon or too much pollution and general waste. They can just buy their way out of problems, right? So it's like, oh yeah, if I throw enough money at it, I can make it go away. And I think it's the same with, you know, planting more trees, although, you know, that is a net good thing for the environment. It's also being used as a way to still do the things that you want to do. So you get to plant a tree because you took a flight to wherever, and that then absolves you of guilt, which is like not really the way it should be done, because you still made the emissions happen in the first place. So I think it's just being conscious of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and like getting rid of unnecessary waste and unnecessary pollution within your company, and replacing it with viable alternatives, really.
Yeah, you're not addressing the root cause of the issue, right? Which
exactly.
is really what you need to do to solve it effectively, rather than just putting a plaster over it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's like something that the ad industry is very guilty of. It's just like putting plasters over problems and then like leaving it for somebody else to deal with. But in reality, it's like the only way that everybody is going to solve this issue is by doing things differently, not by doing the status quo and then covering up for it later. I think it's that kind of go and say your Hail Marys and then you're absolved of all your guilt. Yeah. It's like kind of not really going to work in the future.
And specifically, what you guys are doing with Alchemy, I know we spoke with like Good League before, and like actually kind of having that external party verify what an impression might cost, so then you can actually give that information back to whoever you might be working with. Yeah,
I think we've spoken to a lot of people that offer that, and what we really try and dig deep on is the methodology they're using to determine if their solution is actually providing you with the correct answer.
Yep.
And yeah, Good Loop are a great example, Impact Plus are a great example, Sedera. they have a good methodology for determining the amount of carbon that we use, and the ad tech business is a partnerships business. So by being able to work with those companies that make that their sole purpose, we can feel very confident that what we're delivering is as sustainable as we can possibly make it. As close to 100% as we can get it, I guess, is the goal.
Yeah, I think as well there's something here about supply path optimization as well. Like the you need to know who your partners are and what it is that they do. The way that our system works is we know which node validated a transaction, so we can then look at that node and determine how much carbon that node is used. Right now, if you're using 5 different partners, then you're repeating processes 5 times. It's definitely wastage, but it's also completely impossible for you to gauge the impact of like serving that impression like on page to a user. So by making sure that you're getting rid of unnecessary hops and things like that, you're actually more able to understand it and then more able to do something about it. But if you're just going, I'll just add this partner here, this partner there, and then we'll all run the same processes and come up with completely different numbers, and it just becomes an impossible task then. There's only so many hours in the day that a company has to audit this kind of stuff, and unfortunately, so far, it's been the thing that's taken a back seat. There's people are looking at it now and looking to do something about it now, but it has always been the sort of least important part of their process.
Yeah, and there's a component of trust in that, right? It's like people are trusting other businesses to do what they say they're going to do, and I think that is the beauty of the Ads Explorer, right? It allows nodes to follow a process, so you don't need any trust with the nodes in the system. They can only verify ad transactions that have done or have been through all of the steps that's required for them to fall into consensus and then be written to the ledger itself. So like having that Ads Explorer which is that one source of truth for the ad industry. You don't need to replicate process. You don't need to trust people. You can just verify that transactions are appearing on chain, and if they're not right. You can then see immediately who the untrustworthy partners are in that chain, if they're still there at all.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's actually about plausible deniability than it is necessarily trusting other people. You're just sort of saying, well, it's your problem. I'm going to ask you a question, and then you tell me an answer, and then I can say that I've done my bit. And it's like that's not really going to wash for like much longer. I think people are actually going to have to report in at least on an annual basis, what their impact is, rather than just sort of saying like, well, I asked them and they said it was fine. That's not gonna work.
And I guess to drive that change, and with the transparency nature of the business, and kind of blockchain being transparent by nature, is that something you guys would be up for, kind of reporting, voluntarily, I guess going forward to try and disrupt that change? Because I guess you guys really, and Alchemy is a leader in this space, especially within the ad tech space. So, I guess leading from the front with that would be a nice way to kind of help the market get along.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a feature of what we've built, right? It's like we don't hide the transactions; they appear on the ledger, and they will be validated by partners that we work with in the future. So we'll be reporting that information on every single transaction, not kind of once a year. I mean, we'll aggregate that information once a year in a report that's easy to digest, but really you could check every single impression, every single lost impression, every single won impression to ensure that best practices are being followed, and what we've built can be as sustainable as possible.
Yeah, I think the problem with that a little bit, I mean, we will be building that into our reporting dashboard, but it's hard to benchmark it if other people aren't doing it. So true. Like it's all well and good us saying like, here's a number, and people just go, oh, that sounds like a big number. Like what's that number even mean? If there's nothing to benchmark it against, because obviously there's not really much incentive for other incumbents in the industry to sort of follow suit if it makes them look bad.
I think that leads nicely into my next question, which I know you guys have been doing a lot, which is around the education of this. So this is new for everyone. It can feel slightly overwhelming, or don't really understand what the numbers mean or what's good and what's bad. So how have you been kind of educating the industry partners on the impact of like sustainable practices, and what do you guys have been doing kind of in the field to just kind of raise awareness of this and also just educate?
I think without wanting to oversimplify it too much, it's just explaining the benefits of using Alchemy versus existing Web 2 exchanges, right? There's repeat this forever and ever and ever, but the lower fees, so that the way that ads are bought is more sustainable. You know, like the people that create the content, the publishers, get more money for creating that content so they can continue to exist. You know, there's a lot of large publishers that are now suffering from not having enough revenue because it's been taken away from them by other partners, or in terms of fees or whatever it is. And then I think just like, again, explaining to them how the way that Alchemy works and the way a decentralized ad exchange works differs in having validators that handle the entire transaction, that contribute to a ledger, means that you don't have those replicated processes which create more emissions, just so that you have a report to compare against another report at the end of a month to figure out who owes what to whom. You know, it's features, I guess, of the network again.
I think another thing that's quite important to think about when we talk about like emissions within the industry is wasted effort.
Yeah.
So
true.
when you think, if you are going out and you're spamming a page with 1 cent bids all day, every day, like the amount of wasted like energy that goes into that, essentially, so you can win the lowest possible bid available if nobody else is bidding, essentially, means that there is like a lot of wasted effort that goes into like the whole process. Because if you have 10 partners on page and like only one of them can win, that means that that's 10 times that a bid has to be returned to receive like one winning bid. So even just the nature of the partners that you use being more premium will help that. And essentially, by returning more of the money to the publishers, we incentivize them to have less partners to sort of do that sort of backfill, because it's just repetition of wasted effort. And it's essentially, why wouldn't you bid at 1 cent if you can then sell that on for $1 or $2? If that is a business incentive, but that is not aligned with the incentive of being more efficient and being more green. So that's one of those areas that kind of people forget about. It's actually like, what's your win rate look like? And then if your win rate is low, that means that you're just wasting a lot of energy.
Definitely, yeah. I think there's that there will be like a win rate coefficient that we can create that shows you how much, even in terms of just like the goals that you have as an advertiser. Like if you can win 1 in 3 impressions rather than 1 in 20, you'll be able to serve the ad to the right person at the right time. So it might take fewer ads to get the message across that you're trying to put across. So it will just take less ads, therefore less emissions. You know, it just like everything becomes more efficient.
Nice. So I've got a couple more questions left before we kind of wrap this up. And the next one is around consumer demands and market trends. So how does that influence your decisions and strategy about what we're building at Alchemy?
I think we've always kind of spoken about this idea of interoperability, and interoperability doesn't just stop with the technical side of things. It's also the way in which you communicate with potential and future partners, and their priority at the moment is, and probably will be for the foreseeable future, ensuring that best practices are used so that they have efficient means and sustainable means of buying ads. So by educating people on how our system differs and the benefits to that, we can kind of meet the market where it is in terms of the goals it's trying to hit, and just slowly kind of drip feed with repetition how we do it. I mean, we did a session today, right? And with a very big brand, and 0 people had a Web3 wallet, you know, which kind of shows that anyone that's listening to this podcast is still very, very early. This is like a big global brand we were speaking to, but after that session today, you could see people starting to lean in on the benefits of Web3, the benefits of using a blockchain to buy media. So it will be a relentless educational effort over the next years to come to get people to see what we need to do. And I think we almost will have to take the position of influencing them, because we've built something that is better than what exists. And then I'm sure once that penny is dropped, there'll be things that they think about that we don't know about, that we can then use to influence our future decisions on the product and features that we build.
Yeah, I think as well there's just on a sort of more Web3 sort of bent on that, is that essentially if you think about the way that supply chains for, I don't know, Nike, for example, we always use Nike, Adidas or whoever, work, they essentially guess how many pairs of shoes the consumer's going to want, right? And it's like, it's a very blunt instrument, and then you end up having to sell stuff cheap or whatever. But essentially, it's not the most efficient version of a market. The most efficient way is to go to your consumers before you make the shoe, and you ask them what it is that they want and how they would influence your brands rather than you trying to influence their tastes. So that's where the idea of like communities within Web3 come along and really change from going from audiences that you're trying to target and sell something to. It's like you're going to them and you're saying, what is it would you like in the first instance? And that means that you can make the right number of pairs of shoes rather than like over producing and wasting. So it's that conspicuous consumption kind of goes out of the window, which is something that Web3 really will change in the future. I mean, it's having a sort of small impact now, but over time, I think you'll definitely see that kind of idea of communities replacing audiences, and really having that feedback loop and that like reflexivity within the economy to actually change the way that companies operate and just make sure that they are being as efficient as they can be and not just like wasting stuff because it's cheap and they can do whatever they need to do to make the money.
I think that's a really nice way to kind of draw that back to maybe everyday life. If you're not into Nikes, is like, you know, you put that kind of same scenario into like, you know, a Tesco or, you know, like where it's very something that is perishable waste or whatever, and you have that kind of same system. It's just being a little bit smarter up front and leveraging that technology so you don't waste along the way. So I think when you relate that back to what you guys are doing in advertising, that's a real nice way to kind of see about how, you know, this targeting method, this scattergun approach is just not great for kind of getting that supply part that we've all talked about today.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
So before we wrap it up, one question for you each, or one answer for you each, if you don't mind. What one thing would you want the listeners to take away from this session?
Recycle more. No. I think just to, I think actually, what am I saying? Right. So I would say try and address the root cause of what is causing inefficiencies to allow whatever it is that you're doing to be more sustainable, and try and like build it from the ground up. Don't plaster it on after the fact.
Yeah, sustainability by design rather than trying to fix your problems. I think if you approach it earnestly and then you build something that has it baked in to begin with, then you save yourself a lot of problems later on.
Amazing. Well, lads, thank you so much. Great to catch up as always, and see you next time on LabTalks.
Cheers. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks.